everyone.
Hi, guys. Welcome to the part 3 of the alien interview by Lawrence R. Spencer. Is it? Yeah.
Yep.
That's it. All right. So what do you got?
Well, we're just going to dive right in. We're covering chapter 9, which was broken into 3 parts. Tons of information. This one is a timeline of events and lots of dates.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because the other one was like Earth's history, but like kind of like a broader scale, and it's still going into some of the same stuff, but okay, the first, like that very end of chapter 8, I just wanted to like we didn't get to talk about that amazing, and I just want to iterate. She puts like 7 points of why the Earth is unsuitable for most people to live, thus like that's why it's a prison planet. But she says that it's like not a very suitable place for isbies, and she goes into that a lot throughout just chapter 9. So like the reasons are that 1, there's continental landmass, and it's on a lava bed, and it's continuously shifting. 2, the volcanoes and the earthquakes. 3, the magnetic poles shift every 20,000 years, which cause tidal waves and climate change. So like basically she's just saying like the actual land itself is volatile. Mm-hmm. And then, which we know, but I guess we don't have anything else to compare it to, so whatever. And then she says 4, it's isolated from the center of the galaxy, so it's out of the way from where most other people are, I guess. So right, you know, it's we're in the boonies. And then 5, she says it's heavy gravity, and like the atmosphere distortion is really bad for navigation, hence why they crashed. 6, it's like there's 60 billion other Earth-like planets in the Milky Way alone that and there's not enough resources for them to specifically bother with us at this time so much. Mm-hmm. And then she said 7, the Earthlings aren't even aware that there is bees because of the traps that are in place here, and that most places don't have that. So she actually uses the words that Earth is a ghetto. So yeah, and I just brought that up because it's the very end of chapter 8, and we're talking about chapter 9, but she goes back into the reasons it's unsuitable a lot.
Right. So. Yeah. No, she does. And the other point that she makes in chapter 9 about that, like an additional part, was like an intergalactic war happened in our solar system, well, which made us, planet Earth, really the only somewhat inhabitable planet in this section, but we're really like way off, and there's nothing else out here. We are in the boonies. And that makes it just like hard for anybody to get over here, and all the other planets around us are just not right for their atmospheres.
Yeah. So, okay. So that was the first timeline that she gave was 208,000 BCE. Right. The old empire was conquered, or the old empire conquered this area of the universe. Yes. And they did have via nuclear weapons, and so they had to wait until the radioactivity subsided before they would come back in and colonize. So they didn't come back in until like 75,000 BCE, and that's when Lemuria in Atlanta was established.
Right. Yeah, it says other beings from other galaxies emigrated to this galaxy and continue to do so up to like 10,000. I don't know if that was 10,000 BCE, or I'm not really sure. Yeah, I think it's still happening, really.
Okay, but one note right before all this, though, is that Matilda gives a preference at the beginning of chapter 9, and she says that she took notes because Errol gave her too many dates then, and this made it, but this made her not focus as well as a channel. So it was harder for her to communicate with her because she was having to take notes, but she was giving her too much information, so she had to take notes. So I'm kind of going like, you know, WTF, like you haven't been taking notes up to this point? Like, okay, what have you been doing? Just going like,
Right, and then talking to the stenographer.
Which you had mentioned earlier, and I was like, oh, surely she's just telling the gallery out loud what's going on, but I don't know. That's kind of like...
Yes. Right, exactly. So she was getting this information, and then at what point was she reverberating it? Yeah, exactly, relaying it back. That was the other thing I wanted to mention about Matilda. Oh, at this point, Errol, apparently this download is through Errol, but not really from Errol. So
Right.
she's also downloading this information because she's not a historian. So she's getting this information from her people or from her ISBs.
Yeah. So she said that she's downloading from operatives that have done reconnaissance missions on Earth in the past.
Yes, and it's only starting from a certain date, which I don't even remember what it is, but it was and all the information that they had, it was like that they gathered from the reconnaissance missions. So it was also like not clear information from their part. It was information that they gathered.
And I actually, this I really resonated with, because she says your actual Earth history is very bizarre. It's nonsensical and it's non-sequential because you have all these relics and mythology introduced arbitrarily, and the volatility of the Earth's like cyclical like cycle, it like physically covers up evidence, paired with the amnesia and the hypnotic suggestions, make it basically impossible for even the most brilliant researcher to figure out like the real story of what went on here.
Yes.
And she says, but we don't have quite those limitations. So she's going off of the records that the domain has once they captured the old empire. But even she's still saying like, we don't, I mean, I don't know, guys. Yeah.
These are our notes, what we think. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So again, take everything with a grain of salt. And I'm glad that you mentioned that, because like the timelines, like we always think in such a linear timeline, but we have to not think like that, because there's like layers on top of layers happening at different timelines at the same time.
Well, like, and she even gets into, in a little bit, we'll get into like how they're intentionally trying to confuse us.
Yes.
Like, with history, because they're just like, like they don't want us to remember, or they don't want to give us things that would spark our memory. So they want to keep us completely like, what is that pyramid? How did that get about here? What does that mean?
Right. Which is interesting when we get into the pyramids part. I mean, we could jump into that now, but like the whole, it was, if these prison guards from the old empire were careful and they were worried about not having anything that would remind us of where we came from, like whether it's a symbol or an architectural design or something, because all of our designs were based on the old domains designed and based on other civilizations, then it would make us remember somewhat. So they were careful about that. But I was like thinking about it, and I was thinking it's pretty much impossible for us not to remember at least parts of it. But I think that, keeping us confused.
Well, but she also did say, like, specifically with pyramids, they are the exact opposite of what is representative of an ISB. Like an ISB is like, I don't know how
no mass.
Like you're no mass, no meaning. They just are because they think. You are, therefore you are.
Right, exactly. I think, therefore I am.
I think, therefore I am, yeah. So it's just one of those things where this is like, you don't know what the meaning is, and it's huge amount of mass, like the amount, like it's like really ingrained in physicality, and it's trying to make it seem like it's eternity, like it could be around forever, even though she says it's insane to think that any object is eternal. Like the only thing is eternal is like your soul, like the etheric realm of things or whatever. So I thought that was an interesting little point that she said about that. But I when she gets into Egypt, I was kind of like, I did feel like that. Like when I was in Egypt a month ago, I was going, the hell? Like none of this makes sense.
Right. I can imagine. And it's so, we want to be the sleuths and figure it all out. But the reality is like, no, there's just not, it's not there. And it is the mystery. Oh, I wrote down I liked her question. What is the mystery of the pyramids? The answer is in the question, the mystery, like that was the answer. I was like, all right. Yeah.
Yeah. Like it's meant to make you kind of like, and she also talked about how, our part of the memory jumbling is like half truths, half lies, so that you could, like, it's enough for you to go like, ooh, what is that? But at the same time, you don't like, oh, let's see if I wrote this down. She talks about how we have all these, even our, the priesthood was a way to keep amnesia on the planet in force, and religious mumbo jumbo speak and double speak, indecipherable, muddled, and irrelevant info geometric designs, myth or math calculations that are impossible, astronomical alignments as part of she said this is all part of this false spirituality based on solid objects rather than in Isby, and it's all in order to confuse us. And then I'm kind of going like, yeah, I can get down with that.
Right. Well, I think after reading that chapter or listening to it again, I was thinking like, okay, so the takeaway is we're Isbys, we're immortal, we have no reason for, we just are, and that's it. And that's good enough. And that's like the escape of the prison system itself, like just knowing that we're just, and not like trying to figure it out or remember like all these details that are shrouded in mystery or half truths. So, and because she does the same thing, like everything that she introduces is also like a half lie or half truth, except for the fact that she keeps repeating the fact that we're all Isbys and that we're all creators and that we have eternity.
But then, and I think we've talked about this before in other kind about other things, but where it's like, if they're so advanced, why are they still having wars? Like, I don't understand that. That is such like I don't know, like a primitive barbaric, you do as I do.
Right.
If you're all just Isbys, like I don't understand this whole galactic empire, like the whole
right. Like very patriarchal kind of.
Yeah, very.
Yeah, like dominating, you have to do this. But according to Errol, that's not the way the domain works. Like the domain isn't necessarily like that. The old empire was like that. Like the domain.
Even she said they don't have enough military and police resources to come in and actually clean this place up until 5,000. So they're not 100, like it looks like they had a war with the old empire, and she said it's futile for the old empire to mess with the domain.
Yeah, I don't know what that really looks like. Besides the fact of the whole like nuclear explosions things, that sounded like it was a serious intergalactic war happening. But beyond that, like we don't really know what that means. I feel like in some ways, the old empire, I kept thinking, well, maybe is the old empire actually this empire, or is it really just our old patterns and our old beliefs, their old system of, again, this very, very rigid structural thinking, like left-brained thinking, and then we have to, we're trying to switch over to a different, like more balanced approach to life.
Right. I don't know. Well, we can get into what she says about the earlier dates. So she talks about how Lumiere and Atlanta, or Lumerian and Atlantis, she said that they know very little about it except for they coexisted around the same time, and that both were founded by remnants of electronic space opera cultures. Again with the space opera. Right.
And the electronic, what did that mean?
Yeah. I think what she means by that, they were both fleeing their native. She says they both had the ability to fly, and they had technology of space operas. So I guess, I think that's what she meant by that. So they both left their native planetary systems to escape either political or religious persecutions. And then she says that the domain says that the old empire prohibits unauthorized colonization of planets. So it is possible, she said they're not 100% sure about this, but it is a possibility that some sort of military police force pursuit of the old empire is, they pursued the colonists as criminals and destroyed them intentionally. She said there's no conclusive evidence of that, but it is weird to have two electronic civilizations completely gone like they were.
Yes, but then she talks about the other possible way.
And the other possibility, she said, is the massive submarine volcano that basically took out like the Pacific Ocean. And,
and caused a vacuum and the continents sunk.
And I did think this was pretty cool, because she said this massive volcanic eruption expelled so much like stuff into the atmosphere that that 40 days and 40 nights of no sun being coming in, like it rained for that long. She said that totally would have been possible with something like that, and that would have been enough to cool the planet into an ice age.
Yeah, well, I think we have figured that part out already, that would have been possible. that's what happened with the dinosaurs. So if we thought that if there was the meteorite that hit the earth and that caused that same kind of boom explosion, that's exactly what happened. That's
Right, exactly, like
right, the cloud of coldness. Yeah, it was. Did there was a later reference point to
Oh,
the
but she did say about the dinosaurs, though. She says Isbies caused the global cataclysm that killed the dinosaurs 70 million years ago. Intergalactic warfare of atomic weapons made most of the planets into deserts in this region.
right. That's what I was mentioning before. So I forgot that was that due to that. So we thought it was a meteorite, but either maybe it was a missile kind of thing,
Yeah,
or
or like
intentional or
a bomb.
unintentional. Right. Exactly. Yeah, and she goes on to say like the Lemurians that did survive and the Atlanteans that survived, but the Lemurians, they were the earliest Chinese ancestors, and they were
And
located in,
Aborigines.
yeah, Australia and then areas north of there. And then later on she mentions another Atlanta, but Atlantis. There
Oh
were a couple
yeah.
of
Well,
things that she
she
mentions.
says she says that was actually the Minoan culture,
Right,
but
right.
that the Greek
Called them
philosopher,
Atlantis.
he misidentified it.
Right,
But she
right.
says that's not that. So basically, the one that Plato talks about, she says, is not
The
the ancient
Atlantis.
Atlantis. She said that
Ancient
was a
Atlantis.
confusion. Um,
Right. Exactly. More mystery and confusion, because we often talk about Atlantis and get confused.
right. Which and there's so much stuff about Lemuria and Atlantis right now. Um, in the whatever community, if we belong to that community, we belong to the I don't know. Everybody's always
I
talking
don't know, New Agers, whatever you
New
want to call it.
Agers or spiritual. I don't even know what we are, but like people who like to talk about aliens. Um, yeah, like a lot of people are always like, oh yeah, that this is a Lemurian crystal, or yeah, I mean, I have memories of ancient, like, and I'm like, that's cool, that's great, but I feel like it's like we're all building on this like complete fantasy on top of each other. There's very little to go on.
Well, that's true. That's almost like, I feel like it's like this collective memory that we've created that may not have even really existed. It just existed enough for us, like in our minds, to create it. I don't know. It's way, it just blows my mind, really, because you're like, did this even exist? It's all in your mind. Like, what's to say something's real or not real? No
Yeah,
idea.
and so when people talk really conclusive statements about Lemuria and Atlantis, I'm always kind of like, okay, yeah, okay, maybe. Like we still
Right.
don't even know if those even existed, but cool.
Right. Like, who knows? Exactly.
Okay, so she says starting in 30,000 BC, they
Yes.
started. That's when they started putting prisoners here. That's when it became
Right.
like
The
an
amnesia
untouchable
zone.
prison dump station.
Yes.
And she said that she gave some points where they would put the amnesia systems in place. So she said the amnesia stations were on Mars and then Earth on
Yes.
like
Underground.
some mountains in Africa, the
Yes.
Pyrenees and the Portugal, the steppes in Mongolia, and those were like the force screens that zapped our
Yes.
memories and
The
trapped us.
zappers, right. And then they brainwashed us. So that happened when you departed your body at death, and then we were seen, we were captured, and then we were electronically forced to return to Earth and to maintain the population in a perpetual state of amnesia, as she
Yes.
says. And that long range, okay, then she mentioned something about
Yeah,
this
she did the long range thought control
electronic thought control.
mechanisms, which
Yeah.
I was kind of confused. Is that just so you can get you anywhere you are on the planet, or what? I don't know.
Well, I don't know, but then again, I thought to myself, all right, it's called long range electronic thought control mechanisms. Is that, for me, I was like, is this something with DNA and genetic structure, or again, something with brain waves and the electronic brain waves, like that were repeating these patterns? So is this long range thought control really just, again, our patterns that we pass down from generation to generation, or is there actually something that's like a
Well, I
beat?
mean, she goes into two parts about it later on in the chapter where she kind of says one, like the Ten Commandments were hypnotic,
Right.
forcefully read like statements that kept us in the lie. So like they were kind of like hypnotic thoughts like that. And then she also said that the little handbags and the cones of the Sumerians were like ways for them to detect and collect souls.
Yeah,
I was
so
like,
crazy. Oh, all right. We thought those were like the enlightening things. Who knows?
Yeah, we're all like, what are those? I want one of the little flower watches.
I know. It's like watching Men in Black, and you're like,
yeah, exactly. It's like the church.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and then she does. This is when she gets into the pyramid civilizations were intentionally created as part of the Isby prison system on Earth, and to operate as amnesia traps that were constructed for, and they meant mass, meaning, and mystery, which was the opposite of Isby qualities, which have no mass or meaning, and an Isby is solely because it thinks it is.
Right. Yeah, that I liked. I think that I feel like that for me again are the walk away, like the takeaway points of the whole thing and the whole chapter. Okay, yes, there. I think therefore I am, and Isby is just because.
Yeah.
And wait, let's just see. An opposite mysteries built on hell eyes. Okay, the intricate rituals.
Then she does get into a couple of times. She mentions this. The pyramid culture is fabricated on illusion and nothing more than false civilizations contrived by old empires of a cult called the Brothers of the Serpent. So she mentioned this Brothers of the Serpent a couple of times. She says that that was it was like a mystery school built on half lies and half truth, and that they basically formed all the priesthoods that even later on got passed down to other religions' priesthoods.
Yes. Yeah, because that happened also, like the Brotherhood of the Serpent was in Teotihuacan in Mexico, also with the similar belief of this serpent god. And that whole system. So the pyramids were built facing the old empire's center. And I thought that was interesting how the Nile River represents the Milky Way. I was like, wow, that's kind of cool, actually. So was the Nile River intentionally placed there, or was it like, I don't know, was it built because the pyramids in Egypt like align with the center of the land massages.
They aligned with Orion's belt or whatever.
Well, yes, no, but on Earth itself, they're the center of the land massage, like the continents. So I wasn't really sure what that meant either. What would that mean that they were in the middle? And then they aligned again towards the old empire's center, and same thing with Teotihuacan. That's like a representation of our solar system completely.
And then she does say that countless people have spent endless hours attempting to solve the jigsaw puzzle of Egypt and the other old empire civilizations, and they are puzzles made of pieces that do not fit. And then she also says like this was a nice point, but this is the whole point of her entire thing. You're right, is Isbys do not have a soul, and Isby is a soul.
Right.
And she's like, that's the main thing, is like all of these priesthoods try to tell you that you have the soul.
Yes.
Instead of you are the soul. She says those are big differences.
Yeah, exactly.
And then she talks, and then she goes into 1500 BCE. She talks about Lake Titicaca and Calasagua, the Sun Gate, and it's like Teotihuacana or something. I don't know how I'm saying that right. But anyway, what I thought was that she just mentions that they built that, but then she doesn't mention anything else about that. However, there's this guy called Jerry Willis, and he traveled through a doorway in Amaru. Okay, he's got this story, like I'll link it to at the bottom, but he goes to Lake Titicaca, and he went to one of these old sites, and it looks like a weird doorway. And he said, like, he put his hands up on it, and he did this humming noise that some shamans like told him about, and he went through a portal. And he talks about it's a super fascinating video. I'll send that to you. I listened to it a couple of years ago, and I've thought about it a lot. Like it's what really got me into like, this is a hologram, or this is something different, because he talks about how he ended up being in like this giant white room where like you couldn't tell like the floor from the ceiling from anything, and like this like voice was like who are you, what are you doing, and then he talked to them, and basically he told them where he was from and stuff, and they're like, oh, okay, yeah, well, he basically, this voice tells them that they accidentally created us. They didn't know what they were doing, and like they ripped a hole through like the white fabric, and like they had it placed together for right now, and that somebody accidentally created them, and it's like this cycle of they don't know the origin of anything. But it's a crazy trip, but it was in that same area, so I thought it was weird that she mentions Lake Titicaca when there is a portal that I know of on Lake Titicaca from this other dude.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. Yeah, I guess it all goes back to, like who created who, what Isbys created, because groups of Isbys created other Isbys, and then other Isbys can create. So it's this never ending thing. It's like,
but, and that's the thing, she even kind of alludes that even if they, like the Nephilim, and how like they came down and they saw like the daughters of men were beautiful, so they mated with them. She's like, that's not gods. They still were able to mate with you. That's still an Isby, you know?
Right. Yeah, and that talks about like the whole hybridization. I was thinking about that. I know that comes from the Bible, but it's just so clear, like the hybridizations of races, of intergalactic races.
Yeah. I mean, but even like, that's the thing, is like, even if our genetic DNA was made in a laboratory and we're like some sort of like guinea pig experiment on a zoo thing or something, even if that were true, like, it's still, you go back to, well, who created the thing that created us, and who created the thing that created them, who created them, and them. It's like, even if you created me, you've been created. So who,
right?
Like, you're not my creator, because you weren't created. You were created. So
right.
Whoever created you, and I want to get back to the source of where does creation at all begin.
Yeah, well, that was our conversation last time when we talked about the beginning and how I'm stuck on,
right?
Yeah, because really, I feel like what's the beginning? I always used to think that, and then what comes before the beginning? But then that goes to the whole, there was no beginning. There is no beginning. It's just it is. There's just eternity. I don't even understand that. It's.
I guess where I now have like a bit of issue, or not issue, but like where my brain's kind of going like, what? Is in, okay, so what, like separation and individualization, like from each other, like why, if we all came from the same thing and we're all just fragments of the same thing and whatever, and that is just like this electric force energy or whatever it is, whatever you want to call it, that created everything at some point eventually. Well, I just don't know at what point do we, all like come back to merge together and or know we were part of it, or is that, do we ever, is that part of it, or
I don't know. I wonder the same thing. It's like, but we're always looking for okay, we're going to get to that point where everyone's just going to be like, together. Okay. And then we're going to have to go out again, because like, supposedly if God created itself, like if you think of like God or whatever your thought is about that, and was like, oh, well, I want to experience myself in a different way, which is why God created us.
Anything.
And then so we can have all these other experiences, and it could experience itself in all these different ways. Then it's like, oh, okay, so at what point do we go back to just that? And then do we get bored again and have to go back out? And
it really could be like, oh, it got too busy, too much, bring it in, all right, huddle. And then it's like, all right, this is boring, let's go back out again. Too much, bring it back in, boring, too much, boring, Yes. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. And does that happen like that?
Who knows?
I don't know. I feel like we're trying to like, I think it's great to like philosophize or to think about all these things and to have your ideas. Obviously there's going to never be an answer, because it will be, that's
there's no one to be like, you nailed it, you're correct, that's it, that's the one.
You finally figured it out, you got it.
Okay, you get the prize. Yeah. Okay, right. So then she does talk about how, again, in 1160 or 11600 BC, the polar axis shifted, and that was the end of the Ice Age. So that's when the Ice Age lit up, and that completely covered any last vestiges or existence of the Atlantis area.
Yeah, and there's something about that is I was thinking, okay, so that again was possibly one of the floods, and that reminded me of in some native traditions or beliefs about creation is that we're in the fifth world, so that there were four previous worlds and there were cataclysmic events that ended those worlds, and so now we're in the fifth one. So that would kind of like keep into that same idea of that there was a great flood, there was something that happened that ended that. It's like, okay, the next timeline is starting.
Yeah, I want to get that shaman dude I know who claims he went to Atlantis and to come and talk about it, because he talks about we're the fifth race on the planet.
Oh yeah, exactly.
That
Right.
would be, we'll hopefully we'll get him on the show one day. That would be cool. Yeah, okay. And then she goes into Thoth and how he constructed the Pyramid of Giza to perfectly align with Orion. But and I was thinking about that because I was out on my balcony a month ago looking at the pyramids at night, and then the Orion constellation was above the pyramids, and I was like, oh yeah, this is cool. And you could, if you're on the floor, you can't tell. Like, you would have to have aerial view to know any of that.
That's mentioned later on in another, that was mentioned with the oracle at Delphi, that you would not be able to tell that served as a grid that could only be seen miles above the earth. So that's true, and I think in a lot of cases.
Well, it's definitely true. It's true in like the Nazca lines and
exactly. So then it makes you think, like, okay, so if Thoth created that pyramid, what exactly, like, Thoth is one individual, or was it a collective that how did that really, what was the reality of that? Who knows?
Yeah, I don't know. And Thoth is a bird tribe guy, he's a bird head.
Right. Yeah, the bird head. Exactly.
So I don't know. Not a falcon head, like one of those weird crane heads, but yeah.
No, but that long one.
Yeah. And then she talks about Hedona says that the Atlantis technology was buried under the Sphinx of the Paul, and that that was told by an Anu priest, like one of the Sumerian priests at Heliopolis. And then Errol says that the old empire would not allow this to exist. That's probably not true.
Oh yes, that's what I was thinking. It was highly unlikely that an electronic civilization would be allowed to be left intact on Earth by the old empire prison system administrators. And then I put a note there, my note. Maybe they're just not intact. They're only the remnants of it to help remind us of a time long before.
Yeah, see, but that's the thing. They don't want you to be reminded. So
right, exactly. But still, the remnants are there regardless. Like, so they're not intact, maybe, but they're still pieces. There's still evidence.
And I mean, there is mid Giza Plateau present guys talking about how like they have found 4 chambers in the Sphinx, and there is something underneath one of the paws. But
cool. Yeah.
Of course they say, oh, we looked at it and it was nothing, but I don't know.
Right. It's never nothing.
It's never nothing. Right. Then she talks about in
the Vedic
8002, the Vedic hymns, and she said that this has a lot of spiritual truth, but that it has been incorrectly evaluated by humans, and it still prevents the escape from the prison planet.
Yes. Yeah. But I'm going to get into that later on about the escape from the prison planet, because there was this one part that I thought was, I think we found our way out.
Yeah, I know. But like when I learned about like the Lazu guy and the way, I was like, I had I had a little bit of hairs on my arms, because I don't know if you're there. I don't know. I feel like I have some sort of connection to that person. I think I know who that person is.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I just I've heard about him before another time too, and and I look at a picture. He looks familiar, like as a person I know.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
It's weird. I should probably read that book.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. It sounded really helpful, and it kind of reminded me of Rumi a little bit, like the poetry and like the poetic way that it was like said. Because when he talks about the way out, they asked him before he died, like how.
Yeah, we're talking about how do you say his name? Lazi. Like
Yeah, I would say Laozi.
Laozi, and he wrote a book called The Way, and it's I definitely need to read that. And he's the only one that she kind of knew of that was an Isby that escaped his body and the trap and wrote about it before he left.
Right. Right. Yeah, he wrote about it. And then that I just wrote down some of the poetry that he wrote because they asked him, let me just find that, about, oh yeah, to escape the amnesia machine. I don't know, I put to see, but I'm not sure. Confronted with his own thoughts and past life, he confronted his own thoughts and past lives. In doing so, he recovered some of his own memory, ability, and immortality. So I thought that was it, because he himself confronted his own self, which is what I think that all of us really have to do. And then he wrote, he who looks will not see it. He who listens will not hear it. He who gropes will not grasp it. The formless non-entity, the motionless source of motion, the infinite essence of the spirit is the source of life. Spirit is self. Oh, and then this part I really liked. Walls form and support a room, yet the space between them is most important. A pot is formed of clay, yet the space formed therein is most useful. Action is caused by the force of nothing on something, just as nothing of spirit is the source of all form. And then there's another verse, but the part about the walls form and support a room, yet the space between them is most important. I'm in the middle of doing these like meditations by Dr. Joe Dispenza, and they're all about focusing on the space in between the things, like focus on the space around things, or focusing on the space like around your heart, or the space in. So you're not focusing on the room at all, you're focusing on the space. I was like, oh, well, here it is again. Like, but that is something
That's
that
cool.
Yeah, it's like it's come back around. I'm like, oh, well, this is us facing ourselves, so yeah, I think that's it for us to remember, at least part of it.
Yeah, I think that we got to get on that. Maybe that could be our third book that we look at after we
Right. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
why not?
Yeah. Okay, so then let's see. Okay, after the Vatican just goes into in 1230 AD, that's the old Empire space fleet around the Earth was destroyed, and there was she says at that point, so that's not even that long ago. That's 1230. That's 80 after that. Yeah, so that's like only 1,000 years ago. Or 800 years ago. That's when there's no more police force or military. So that's when military renegades and pirates and miners and merchants and entrepreneurs came to Earth for personal gain.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Right. Or just to have, I thought it was like just to have the experience. They wanted to like enjoy like the physical life.
Of, yeah.
Yeah.
But then do you get trapped here? Why is there so many people? Right. Here's the other thing. It's like right now, living on the planet, the 8 billion of us, is more people than have ever existed on the planet.
We know, assuming.
Well, that's true, that we know of. But I mean, it is one of those things where we definitely have a super high population right now. Like, well, in the turn of the century, like in 1900, there was only like not even 1 billion people on the planet. And
right. We keep doubling our population every like however many years and increasing it. Yeah, and that's a crazy thing.
Where are all those souls coming from?
Well, my thought was that you might not necessarily have one soul per body. Maybe you have, the same soul could be in 2 different or 3 different bodies. Like I'm consciously having this experience right now, but how do I know that a fragment or part of my soul isn't just in another body and having a conscious experience?
That is kind of an interesting concept, because I have heard about they talk about soul families,
right?
Like a soul collective groups,
yeah,
or whatever, where there's like, I don't know, I think they're like pods of like 6 to 12 people or something that come in and like play different roles for each other.
Yeah, you reincarnate with the same soul family, they say, and yeah. But how does that work like right now? The fact that we're here now and I'm living my experience, I'm conscious of it as much as I am conscious of it, but I don't think I'm having another experience in this timeline right now in like India somewhere, like.
I mean, back to the whole, it's like, at some point you have to like, just like let go of all external ideas that people are feeding you and be like, wait, okay, like what do I feel is true for my observation of the world. And I don't know. I mean, like, I don't, you know, like, I don't, that, like,
Right.
that's the same with Lumeria or Atlantis, where I'm like, yeah, maybe we have soul families. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe.
I think so. I mean, that to me, that makes sense to me. That's
It
when
makes
you kind of
sense,
like,
but at the same time, how do you know, like, who's in it or not of yours that you meet?
well, I don't know, but I would guess like from just reincarnation standpoint and even going back, not going back to super far of like your complete soul origin, but let's say reincarnation for the last 1,000 years or whatever, like you have kind of karmic duties to perform between the people that you've hurt and been hurt by, or like you just have karmic plays to play out. And so it makes sense to go with those same people because you're not finished with it just because your life is over, like your life on the, as that person. So you have to come back and experience it a different way.
But the thing that's kind of interesting about that is, and maybe this is where the flower of life like makes a little bit more sense, where it's like say within your life, it would be like your husband and your son and your mother and your brother and your dad, or like these things. But your husband would have other people in his group than you would have in your group, because his connection isn't to your brother and your mother. I mean, it's to you and your son maybe, but not to or like
Yes.
your son would be, maybe he'd have his own life someday with other members of it. So it's kind of like it spreads out to where it encompasses like way more than
Yes.
just who is in your soul family. Maybe who's in your soul family also has other soul families.
Yeah, that's true. And it could expand larger than, than you think. And also like, what was I just thinking about that with the soul family? Like you have, it reminded me of the six degrees of separation. I'm like, even when you talk to people now and you don't know, like, people, I'm sure we have mutual contacts, contacts or like people that we know, if we went through all of our people that we know, like there's just repetitiveness, or people that we're interested in, or people that like we've met in some capacity or something. So there's this overlay. It's like, it's like,
yeah, I mean, it'll be like I dated a guy a couple
like
years
Kevin
ago,
Bacon.
and he was just like it showed we added each other on Facebook, and it was like, oh, you know this chick? Yeah, I know. I went to college with her. Oh, really? Yeah, she worked at my first job. It was like just
right. So then I think that that's part of the soul family. It doesn't have to be like super knit, there's extensions of it in some capacity and like room for growth. And the other thing is like, from when I was talking to someone about past lives, and she was somebody that was a medium or like did my astrological chart or whatever. And she was like, well, you have a past life, like two different planets before you got to Earth. So then you have soul families, not just from one, but actually 2 other planets.
I could
So
see that. Yeah.
that's where other people might show up in like an extended version, but who knows? I mean, it's all just whatever you think.
It's all just, we don't know. I mean, yes. Yeah. I mean, anyway, she goes into, I mean, all this other stuff is about like again, the Minoans, who she said is misidentified as Atlantis. That's in 1500 BCE.
Yeah.
More with the Brotherhood of the Serpents that they waged a war against in 1300, but they did not win. The domain did not win. And then she talks about how in 1190 Troy was destroyed, and the domain and the old empire fought violently for 300 years.
Oh, right.
To me, makes no sense. It's like
no, exactly. But I think that was all part of the old empire stuff, like that super violent, according to.
I did think this was interesting. She says that in 850, Homer wrote stories about the gods that were pretty accurate about Isbis that were able to avoid biological bodies.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, that was cool. That was interesting.
What's that mean? Like we're more like Zeus than we are like we are? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I was trying to think about that too. I was like, wow, that's crazy. Like more accurate than we had thought. Okay. I did want to mention like a little bit later on about the commanding officer of the domain and the battalion who was lost. I know that's a little bit farther. Is there anything between those 2 points that you wanted to mention?
Let's see. The Vedic hymns were translated into Greek in 1700, which is how that's where the ideas apparently, or she's claiming that's where the ideas for democratic republic came from. So I always thought that
Yes.
started with Greek, but apparently that was in the Vedics. So that's new to me.
Yes.
And then
Yeah, and that was like the Cultural Revolution, more reasonable conduct, and then that's kind of what like lit up the enlightenment of an age.
and then in 630 BC, Zoroaster, and I've heard about him a couple of times in Persia. So I guess that's um, he basically, this confused me because it says Zoroaster in Persia he created a monotheistic god after Arul Mazda. All right, that Isbi Arul Mazda.
Yes.
The operative of the domain put in place to replace the polyply of the old empire gods. So I'm kind of going like, wait, didn't earlier you said having a monotheistic religions were like bad because it meant that there was just one thing? And then this seems like, nope, now she's saying that the domain put that to replace the old empire gods. And I'm going like, okay, now wake up your mind, Errol. Are you into monotheism or not into monotheism?
Yeah. I don't think it matters, but yeah, there's a lot of things that contradict each other, or again are unclear. I feel like Errol herself is, or the domain is also playing into the whole confusion and half truths. Again,
Yeah.
this is just it is what it is. There's a little bit of truth to all of it and none of it.
Yeah. The only other two notes I have, like I have the Lazi, the Way guy, which we all need to read that book. Seems like a good book, maybe. And then she talks about like those devices, the Tree of Life, are designed to detect Isbis, which would be those handbags and the cones of the Sumerians. So that would have
Oh,
been like 500 and something BC.
yes, but that was actually okay. Yes. Because then later on, no, but I was confused by that because
Yeah, it's a weird
that
time
was
to put in there, but
well, it was the domain search party devised. That was after the domain search party devised wide. It says that they devised a wide variety of electronic detection devices needed to track the electronic signature or wavelength of each missing member. So what that, remember earlier she had the missing members. So they were down to, they were like 900.
right.
No, there were, sorry, there were
3,000 other people
3,000.
went missing, and
Yes, they sent out a search party of 900, and they broke off into these teams, and they needed to detect them. So they devised this electronic detection device, and then that's how they were going to find their missing members, and they were able to track them through various lives. And so that continued to hold true. But that was where they were the ones. The domain was the one who devised this Tree of Life electronic detection device. To detect the presence of life Isbis. So that reminded me of like the whole zapping machine from the old empire, because I was like, so they have their own electronic like detection system.
Yeah.
How
Like
is that any different from like the other detection system that's now just going to zap
the
you?
long range one. I don't know, but
I don't know either.
that also confused me, and I was kind of going like, well, and aren't we all Isbis? Like, why do you need to detect an Isbi? Are you just looking for specific people? Like, I guess that's what they're doing. I don't know.
They were looking for people that were downed during that time from the domain, because the domain, the commanding officer, this is where I thought later on, we won't ruin the ending, but I think we probably will allude to Matilda, right? So there's this commanding officer of the domain battalion who was lost in 5965 BCE, but then was detected and located by a search party. And
Is this Cyrus?
this was Cyrus II, right? Yeah, the system of organization was used by Cyrus II and members of the battalion who followed him through his progression of human lives on Earth, and then enabled them to build the largest empire in the history of the Earth to that date. And there were 900 officers on the domain search party that traveled around Earth in 3 teams of 300 each. Some of them went into the land, some of them went to the water, and some of them into space. And they found that some of the original domain people or souls were incarnated in lives, including like dolphins and whales, the ones who live in
Yeah.
the water.
Yeah.
So my thought was like, okay, so there are like these 3,000 people or souls, Isbis from the domain that are like scattered around Earth, kind of like bringing an enlightenment or holding the vibration at some form in all these different ways. But the domain is trying to search for them to like find them again and like bring them home. I don't know. Like get them off the prison planet. That was my guess.
Yeah, but they don't really go into whether they were successful with that or not. And you assume they weren't because later on, like, yeah, you know, whatever, you find out Matilda is one of those 3,000.
Right. So
Or
she's
so
just remember, but she was revealed, I guess, at that time that now she.
yeah, so but that's the thing.
Yeah.
It's like you know where she is, you know, you track her, but at the same time, you can't do anything for her. You can't get her off. So it's
I don't know. Well, that's curious because I wonder, like, she decided to end her life with
in those stone
euthanasia
circles. Yeah, in
in those
euthanasia.
stones. Oh,
Yeah,
in those
remember? Like in
circles
Ireland, she went to
in
those.
Ireland, those sacred sites. So maybe
Uh-huh.
she intentionally was gearing up so that she would go
And
on, or
maybe if she is even a real person, she went and like was instructed on how to do so, where to do it.
right, exactly. We don't really know because she continued to have. We'll get into that at the end, like in our fourth video, but she continues to have contact with Errol after this whole episode with the military.
See,
So
I don't even remember that part. That's yeah.
so her entire life, she was getting downloads through dreams and regular basis. Errol visited her. So, and she heard voices. So that means that like what, her entire life, what other information did she not write about?
Well, that's the thing is like, if there were any like truth, like you're an a-hole if you didn't like download all that and give it to everybody, you know?
Right. Yeah. Like where's the rest of her works? Was this all of it? Like she didn't write down all that other information that she was in contact with Errol
Right.
about? Like, who knows?
So
Anyway.
then the last point I had really about this chapter and everything is that the Knights of the Templar control all the banks on the planet, or
Oh,
because
yeah.
like they were in trouble, they were they were controlling things kind of more openly, and then they got banished by, I can't remember, they didn't write the king's name down, and then they escaped to Switzerland and they set up the banks that control the planet even to this
Yeah.
day.
Right.
And then the purpose is to finance international like genocide and wars, is to prevent Isbis from open communication because they don't want us sharing information and becoming enlightened and thereby escaping imprisonment. So yeah, okay, that makes sense.
That's what I had as my, well, that was the last part, the very, very last part of that chapter. And that seems so relevant, so true, because we're just constantly in perpetual war. There's the whole like the warfare system, that's the military industrial complex that's still like playing out today, and the International Monetary Fund. I'm just curious how all of those things like establish themselves and what that means for today. And then the whole tax thing, that was a little bit earlier, but she talks about like how like taxes have been around like forever. And so I was thinking of the quote, like when you know, the only thing that is guaranteed in life are
death
like
and taxes.
right? And I'm like, oh,
well, there you
so
go.
that's everywhere, huh? Let's get rid of these stupid taxes everywhere. It can't just people be free.
I don't believe that. If you don't have a physical body and there's no physicality to things and you can come in and out, and like she almost does talk about that with possessions, like you can possess something whether or not you, like when you're dead you could just go to it, like you don't.
Right. That's interesting. Yeah. She
like,
said
so,
on other places, like people that remember or souls that remember would just go back and be like, oh, that's, you know, that was my possession.
That's my thing. Yeah.
But now we're just a bunch of vultures that are like dividing up things after a person's gone.
Yeah. So that's where I'm kind of going like, you know what? I don't believe in, like, what does not sit with me is the whole like giant like intergalactic wars and like that, like remnants of things that we have on the planet, like taxes and stuff like that carries on in etheric land. I don't know, it might, but it doesn't sit with me well.
Yeah, well, I think
because I just don't ultimately think it makes a ton of sense.
Well, it doesn't resonate. It probably just doesn't resonate with your soul because maybe you're not from a place that has that naturally, or you're from a different realm that doesn't have that type of system. But there are other physical worlds besides Earth. Not everything is, you know, like this other dimension. Like there could be just, parallel type of universes that they have these similar systems. And everything that's here, even the architecture, came from other civilizations. So it makes sense that it's repeated over and over again. And it's like, oh, all right, well, Star Wars, that makes sense that we're finding it here on Earth if that's happening at the galactic level. And maybe the place where you come from is all like peace and love, and they don't need to engage in that, and they prefer to stay out of it. But there are other civilizations that like to engage in that, and that's what they do.
Yeah, I mean, but then they suck, and they're not like.
I know. And for us, like, I think so too. Like, it doesn't, like, I have an aversion to it, but at the same time, if that's God experiencing itself,
Yeah, that's true.
Then nothing is really bad in the long run, which is so hard to really comprehend. But it's like, we're so easy to be like, no, this is polar, like, that's bad, that's good, like, this is war is bad, but at the same time, when you look at it from a different perspective, it's just an experience, which is hard to really swallow.
I mean, that is true. And I do feel like everybody's played the whole victim, savior, or, perpetrator before,
exactly.
Like, been one of those roles, and then just those perpetuate in giant circles. But
that's right. Yeah, I always used to think, like, when my life was over, I'd be like I kind of pictured like a stage, and like everyone, like me giving out awards to everybody in my life. Thank you. Thanks for
the Academy Awards of Danielle.
Academy Awards go to. Thanks for pushing my buttons for 35 years.
You really got me going there. That's it.
But it makes me laugh. Like, if you could think of that, and you really think of like Shakespeare and like all the world's fine, we're all just actors. It's just like, it's so true. It just kind of laugh. You're like, oh, I'm acting in this role right now. This is great.
Well, and I have heard that you do a life review, or, like some near-death experiencers say that there's a life review when you die, and you get to see your actions through the point of view of others, like, instead of through your own point of view. And then you're kind of going like, oh, and there's so much that, like, people like can annoy me, and they don't even know they're annoying me, and so I wonder, who knows what I've done to other people. Like, I can't even begin to tell you. Like, I don't know. Because like sometimes you'll be like, I know I'm annoying that person, but I don't care. Like, yeah.
I will continue.
Yeah. They can eat it. That's great. Yeah. So I don't know. Yeah. Sorry. So that's all. That's really all. That's my last note. What else do you have?
No. Yeah, that was it. Also, the person. The last thing that she notes there in chapter 9 was about the banking system and the point of it. But I did, again, like when I kind of like reflected back on the chapter, like, what's the takeaway? I'm like, all right, we're all Isbies. We got it. There's no, like, we're never going to figure out the mystery. Well, we might, like, these little things may help us to remember, or they may just make us more confused. But the point is to remember that we're an Isbie, and we can reconnect to the divine. Like, we're just never not connected, actually. And I felt like kind of like it was positive, like it wasn't negative. But one point I do want to make is I was doing this, like, taking the notes again before I went to bed. And when it was such an intense chapter, and I was like, okay, I want to make sure that, like, I'm kind of protected in my dream state, because I was listening to something about you could just go in and before you go to bed, just, say you want to cut off like portals that do not serve you, or like, protect yourself as you go into the dream world or whatever. So that's kind of what I did. And my dreams, when I first started to dream, were just so intense. They were just intense. I know it was directly related to this. So.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, because you said you hadn't been dreaming a lot lately, so that's.
Yeah, I do dream. I dream all the time. I just never take the time to write them down or to remember them. Like, I know I dreamt most of the night last night, but my intention last night was to not get caught up in this information, like that it was like just to let it go and like be okay with it and be in my safe zone, and also to feel well rested. And I woke up feeling really well rested. So I think that worked. Yeah. Any last thoughts you had?
Well, nope. We'll continue more next time, and hopefully we can finish the rest of the book in one. Like, let's see. But we do have at least an hour and a half of audio left.
Yes.
Or almost 2. No, it's like an hour and a half left.
It's an hour and a half, and it's good information about the whole, you want to
Bugs
stay
and
tuned.
blossoms. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Bugs and blossoms, where the geoengineering came from, and theory of evolution. Definitely don't want to miss that.
And it'll be the conclusion of the alien interview next time. All right, you guys,
Yes.
thank you so much for listening to us if you made it this far, and see you next time.
See you next time. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.